Today we're going to continue with the staff lessons and go into the next 2 or 3 moves. So we'll start with a quick review of the last lesson so that we'll be in the right position. So in the last lesson, after the beginning of section 2, you end up in this position with the long end of the staff out. And then we did a low block in front of the right leg as we step forward. Remember to keep the staff 2 inches off level of the ground. And remember to do the correct sliding as we discussed in the last lesson. From here we did a low sweep. And then we did a pull back. And then overhead strike. So this is where we're going to end up for the next 2 moves. In manipulating the staff, we talked about knowing ahead of time how much to slide. There's another element in the staff that you need to be aware of, and that is the pivot point in the staff. The staff is a great teaching tool because it kind of teaches about pivot points, leverage, sliding, and things. And so if you've ever chopped wood, you know that you grab the axe, and when you come over, you slide the hand to create the greatest amount of leverage, like that. In the same way, when you're manipulating the staff, when you have your pivot point here, once you do the slide and you have the pivot point, this sliding action of the other hand, the forward hand usually, is sliding along the staff very much the same way that when you're chopping wood, this overhand slides down to create the greatest amount of leverage. If you were to chop wood grasping here, you would lose a lot of that velocity that you gain from that slide, like here. So in the same essence, this slide creates that sliding of the hand down, that chopping motion. On top of that, the pivot points in the staff change constantly. So there's something in the beginning, it's going to be like a lot to think about, you know, the pre-slide and then the pivot point and the sliding action, but it's all something that you'll become more aware of as you progress with the staff. And so we kind of like analyze this one simple slide. You do the pre-slide to get into the right position so that you have the right amount of staff on your shoulder. And as you're doing the sliding action here, there's a certain point right in here, we discussed that in power generation, 3 levels of power generation video, where you can add to that slide velocity by actually snapping in at the end. So there's 3 processes: pre-slide, the actual sliding of this forward hand, and then the whip at the end. So those are elements that you need to consider in manipulating the staff. So in this next move, we're going to address this actual idea of the pivot point and that actual whipping action at the end. So from the next move, from this position, the next move looks like this. First you slide and come through. Okay, one more time. From this position here, you have to judge the right amount of distance to the ground so you have room for your staff to do the pivot. So from here, you're going to slide up, and where this, I'll do it from this side, easier to see from here. This distance that you actually end up with a first initial pivot point is going to depend on how high your arm is. So if your arm is low, you'd have to be down here. And if you want to have more extension on the staff on the final end, you're going to have to raise your hand up so the staff has more clearance. Again, we talked about the correct height for the staff is one hand height over your head. And if you had a longer staff, then you have to learn how to manipulate the staff with that extra length. So from the overhead strike, you need to re-slide. And here, as you're stepping forward, you're going to pivot and slide like that. So this is the pivot point, and this is like a pendulum. You can see the staff already has a potential to pivot forward, so you're just adding to that with a slide here. So again, as we previously discussed, at some point from here, the pivot point would change to about here because you're going to snap the backhand down. So if this hand stays, the left hand stays constant, then you start using this concept of leverage. But also at some point, the pivot point can be here when you exchange both this point and this point. So a simple move can be actually fairly complicated in the conceptual aspect. So from here, stepping forward and snapping down to gain that extra oomph up for the hit. So again, from the overhead strike, slide, pendulum swing, snap down. Again, from the overhead strike in this position here, you're going to slide, and then as you step forward with this pendulum swing, when the staff reaches its outer extension, you snap down on the backside. So you're going to have to get an intuitive feeling for all those actions, how to manipulate the staff so you get to generate the greatest amount of power. When you finish in that final position, your shoulders should be fairly straightforward. It doesn't have to be like totally square, but kind of not out at an angle like this. Okay. From here, the slide, the pendulum swing as you step forward, and then into kind of a semi-bow stance. It could be a even horse too, but I kind of weight my weight on the front leg here. One more time. This will be probably the hard move of the two moves from here. Okay, the slide. Again, the distance that you slide is going to be how high you hold your arm. So the more you slide, the higher that pivot point arm has to be in order for the staff to thing. So I want to go way out with this motion. I would go and then shoot through. So whatever you feel most comfortable with. From here, you're going to step back into a crane stance as you block. And so again, from the slide, and then it's like the staff kind of does a semicircle loop to the block. Also, going back a little bit on, since I'm facing this direction here, on that pendulum swing, if you do, you can do it two ways actually. If you slide alongside your body as you're doing the step forward, and then you come into the center and do the snap. Or you could get the staff in front of you and then do the snap like that. a little bit different each one. You can kind of experiment and feel which one is best for you. The one from the side and the one that goes kind of more through the center, like that. Okay, so going back to the lesson: overhead, the slide, the pendulum, and the snap. And then the semicircle into the block. I forgot to talk about the hand position when I was doing the filming, so I'm doing this in the editing stage. Notice my left arm is relaxed and straight down, and the right arm is just over top of my head. And in the blocking position, the staff is going to be right in front of you. Also notice the position of my left toe in the crane position. The toe is pointed straight down. Into the crane, and then just a step forward and strike. Those three will be together, so it's going to look like this. From the overhead, pendulum, circular block, crane position, and forward strike. One more time. Pull back, overhead strike, pendulum, block, and forward strike. Horizontal forward strike. One more time, slower. Overhead strike, the slide, the pendulum and snap, the semicircle to crane stance block, horizontal strike. Again, from this position, okay, so from here, the pendulum, again, from here, you're going to have to pull this hand back and the staff to the right amount of distance from the ground. And then again, from here, when you go to do this, you slide to the 1.5 foot for the horizontal strike. Overhead block, pendulum swing, circular block, the crane, slide, horizontal strike. So we'll end the lesson there. So there's 3 moves that you have to work on. Okay, thank you.